We now enter the last block of this session. Harald mentioned large-scale forest disturbances and specifically bark beetles. So we will have 3 speeches on the dynamics of bark beetles, starting with Professor Sigrid Netterer from Boku, Vienna, whose talk will deal with drought and bark beetles in mountain forests. So Sigrid, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to talk about drought and bark beetles. I'm not professor, I'm just a doctor, but I hope I can nevertheless tell you the most important things about the causalities causing mass outbreaks of bark beetles. I would like to start with the opinion paper of Schultz and colleagues, who looked at or assessed the impact of the extreme 2018 summer drought event on Central European forests. And this so-called auto drought was the most severe and long-lasting summer drought and heat event ever recorded. It was even the most severe event in Europe for the last 500 years, which meant that the mean growing season air temperature lay above 3.3 centigrades above the long-term average. And what you see also in the below figure is that the climatic water balance in terms of precipitation minus potential evapotranspiration was very, very low. It was even the lowest record since 1900. In the same paper, the authors looked at drought-induced tree mortality, which was considerable among the main European tree species important for alpine forests. You see a picture of beech near Basel in Switzerland that was dying that year. And also Scots pine was affected. Here a picture from the Vienna woods in Austria. And of course, the most important conifer species, Norway spruce and silver fir, they were also severely affected. Here again, 2 pictures from Switzerland of dying trees. Apart from drought-induced tree mortality, there were severe signs of drought stress in this severe drought here, which were shown by exceptionally low foliar water potentials.
Sigrid, I'm sorry to interrupt. We can hear some disturbance from the microphone. Maybe you can speak closer to the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it better now? That way?
Yes, I would say so. Thanks.
Do you hear me better that way?
Very much.
Sorry?
Yes. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Hello, I'm sorry. Do you hear me?
We do.
Oh, okay. And there was also widespread leaf discoloration and premature leaf shedding observed in that year. Most importantly, this impaired physiological status of the trees did not disappear until the next year, 2019, which meant that these trees were highly vulnerable to secondary damage, such as fungal pathogens and insect attacks. So which insects do I mean? I would like to provide some examples here for Scots pine. You see in the left-hand figure the brood galleries of different species that play a role. Above, you see breeding galleries of Ips acuminatus, the 6-toothed pine bark beetle, which is widely distributed across Europe and Siberia, and which has shown mass outbreaks, not only in lowland pine forests, but also in alpine valleys that are very dry. 2 other species, the lesser and the common pine shoot beetle, are early swarming species that tend to establish 2 generations in a warm season. They attack mainly trees weakened by previous damage, such as insect defoliation or fire damage, and in particular drought. In the Mediterranean region, there is a relative species that causes significant tree mortality, also on fairly vital trees. Another, not bark beetle, but bush-breasted beetle also reacts very positively to warm and dry climate and then tends to show mass outbreaks. And finally, another example, Ips sexdentatus, the 12-toothed pine bark beetle,
that mainly infests Scots pine, but also other pine species such as black pine or maritime pine. And it shows increasing economic significance in Northern and Central Europe. And for instance, established a mass outbreak in 2003, where it established up to 3 generations. In warmer areas such as Italy, France, and Spain, mass outbreaks of this pine bark beetle are quite common, and it also tends to attack fairly vital trees.
The still most important conifer tree species in Europe is the Norway spruce, which is widely distributed from the south to the north of the continent and highly valued for its fast growth and timber quality. Its most important bark-boring species is Ips typographus, the Eurasian spruce bark beetle, which finds optimal breeding conditions, especially in even-aged spruce forests of low altitudes. This figure, published in a report of the European Forest Institute, clearly illustrates that the spruce bark beetle has been almost constantly in epidemic phase since the early 1990s, when large areas of spruce forest had been damaged by windthrow. The countries most affected by bark beetle outbreaks have been the Czech Republic, southern Germany, in particular Bavaria, and Austria. When we analyzed data of the Austrian federal forests about timber volumes harvested due to bark beetle attacks, we found that the main stand-related drivers of spruce bark beetle mass outbreaks were increased share of Norway spruce, increased stand age, and either very high or very low stand density. A quite unexpected finding was that Norway spruce stands growing on chronically dry sites were less affected by spruce bark beetle attacks. One possible explanation is the adaptation of trees to constantly dry conditions, which might make them more resistant to water deficits and biotic attack. On the other hand, in spruce stands growing on usually well-watered sites, and which were subjected to acute drought stress, timber loss due to bark beetle infestation was much higher. We found that the probability of first attack in highly predisposed Norway spruce dominated stands of increased age was rising with spring and summer water deficits and temperature sums accumulated over the season. This relationship was even more distinct for continued attack in the following year, which was much more probable in case of drought episodes in June, July, or August, and thermal sums allowing for the full development of 2 to 3 bark beetle generations.
So what are predictions for the future? In this study by Barbara Benz and colleagues, they show that the proportion of more than 2 spruce bark beetle generations will significantly increase in the next decades, especially in the northern areas of Europe. When we look at the Central European alpine regions, also 2 bark beetle generations will probably be very common. This, of course, depends on multi-use diapause of this bark beetle species. An important aspect that is now better explained by my colleague Martin Schebeck. That's all from my part. Sorry that we had problems with the mic. I'm really sorry.
Thank you very much, Sigrid. It happens sometimes with online connections, but I think we could grasp the main message of your presentation. And in fact, what we would like to do now is get more acquainted with one of the usual suspects, Ips typographus, which will be the subject of our next speech by Dr. Martin Schebeck, again from BOKU Wien. So Martin, if you're with us, the floor is yours.
Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
And hear me?
Yes, both.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me. And in the next couple of minutes, I want to talk about the specific developmental strategy, a so-called diapause, and how this affects the outbreak behavior of the most important pest of Norway spruce forest in Europe. As we just heard, outbreaks of this bark beetle are strongly triggered by abiotic factors like strong storm or drought, but there are also some intrinsic species-specific traits that make Ipstapocraphus such a severe pest. On the one hand, it has a high resistance to tree defense compounds to successfully colonize hosts. Then it can efficiently colonize with pheromones to initiate mass attacks together with conspecifics. Then it is associated with fungal symbionts that we will hear more in the next talk about. And last but not least, it is such a severe pest because it has a high reproductive output in terms of fecundity on the one hand, and on the other hand, it can establish multiple generations per year, so it has a multi-volatilism strategy. And the number of generations per year, which makes it such a severe pest, is on the one hand triggered by ambient conditions like temperature, but also by biological traits of the species itself. In general, insects in temperate regions have to match their life cycles with fluctuating resources, for example, to be in the right place at the right time. For example, this is important to find suitable mating partners or food sources on the one hand, but also to mitigate harmful effects of environmental stressors and to avoid mortality. And in mountainous regions, these are often adaptations against cold during harsh winters. And as you might expect, that these factors are important for the seasonality and the survival, and therefore for the outbreak behavior of pest species in forest ecosystems. Specifically, many insects express a so-called diapause, which is a specific developmental program as a response to fluctuating environments. Diapause in mountainous areas in Europe often occur during harsh winters, during these seasons of unfavorable conditions, and are characterized by a developmental and reproductive arrest, a reduced metabolic rate, and an increased resistance to external stressors, specifically against cold during winters. And now it's important to keep in mind that among insect species that express diapause, we have species that are either facultative diapausing. This means that these insects perceive an environmental signal which programs them to enter diapause during a later time point. And on the other hand, we have species that are obligate diapauses. That means they express diapause independent of an environmental signal, and they just express diapause due to their genetic makeup. And now, Ipstapocraphus is a very outstanding example where in a recent study we found that within this one species we have two different developmental strategies connected to diapause. On the one hand, we have individuals that are facultative diapausing. This means that they perceive a photoperiodic cue in terms of short day lengths, and these signals are translated into the developmental program to enter diapause to arrest development and reproduction during winter. On the other hand, we have individuals of Ipstapocraphus that are so-called obligate diapausing. This means that they enter this developmental and reproductive arrest independent of a photoperiodic signal. So they enter diapause no matter how environmental conditions are. And this has, of course, strong effects on the number of generations per year, as diapause affects the reproduction and the development of this species. This means that facultative diapausing individuals of Ipstapocraphus can resume their reproduction and development until they perceive a photoperiodic cue in late summer, early fall. This means that until late summer, early fall, they can produce multiple generations and have a so-called multivoltinism strategy. On the other hand, Ipsdypographus that enter an obligate diapause, they can only produce one generation per year, a so-called univoltinism strategy, because they express diapause independent of day lengths and is only regulated by their genetic makeup. And these obligate diapausing beetles can resume their development and reproduction only the next year after they overwintered and after they hibernated. And knowledge on facultative and obligate diapause in Ipsdypographus is important not only for basic sciences, it is also very important for applied fields, as it regulates the number of generations that can be produced per year. So in the next steps of our research, we will look at various populations in Europe and want to find out how many individuals of Ipsdypographus can produce multiple generations per year and how many individuals can produce only one generation per year, which has very strong effects of the potential of Ipsdypographus to damage forests. And diapause is also important in the light of climate change, as evolution would favor the facultative diapause phenotype because it tends to produce more generations under more favorable conditions. And this has very strong effects on the outbreak behavior and on the potential to damage spruce forests. So the take-home message is that it's very important to have very specific knowledge and ideas on the biology and ecology of these pest species to make predictions and to get to know how they might affect spruce forests in mountainous areas. So with this, I'm already at the end of my talk. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for telling us more about the life of the spruce bark beetle, which of course we have to know better if we want to prevent further outbreaks. But it seems like we are still missing one piece of the story. So the Consul Catriona Graham this morning told us that everything is connected in ecosystems. And we are about to hear an example of this because spruce beetle outbreaks are connected with other living beings, such as bacteria and fungi. And that's going to be the subject of our last talk of this first session by Dr. Hannes Schuler, who will be presenting here, coming from the Free University in Bozen.
All right.
Hannes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. I have the privilege to be the last one before the coffee break, but I will be short and simple, hopefully. Thank you, Alessandro and John, for inviting me, giving me the opportunity to present our project here at the COP conference, COP26. The project is about the role of bacteria and fungi in the ecology of the European spruce bark beetle. Earlier today, Martin and Sigrid gave you already a very nice introduction about the spruce bark beetle, and I will focus now on another tropic layer and also the importance of bacteria and fungi in this system. So the project Dolomites focuses on a bark beetle outbreak in the Dolomites. So there were and there have been recent storm events. You all know the picture here about the storm Vaya, which occurred in 2018. And for those of you who don't know those pictures, I really suggest to make a walk right around the corner at the National History Museum of Milan. They have an exhibition about the storm event. Really nice pictures and really impressive. This shows also, beside the COP event in Milan, also these topics reached the cities, and this is important for the communication with the people, of course. Here in the picture you see in red the hot spot of this storm event. So northern Italy was heavily hit by this storm event, and the area of the Dolomiti Life area, this is where we focus our study. So this is the eastern part of South Tyrol, the northern part of Belluno, and the western part of eastern Tyrol. This is where we have the focus of our study, and this is where we collected our beetles. But there was not only storm, so Sigrid already mentioned a lot of drought events and the fitness on the host and on the trees. There are also other sides of the coin of climate change. The recent snow damage events, especially in this area of the Alps, the last 2 years, the forests were heavily influenced by storm events. As you see in the picture, trees were destroyed and were severely affected by these snow damage events, and so therefore also this is a huge problem in this area. So the recent storm and snow events in the Dolomites are the ideal conditions for the outbreak of Ips dibogasphagus. As my colleagues already mentioned, the beetles need weakened trees to attack them, and these are of course great conditions to start an outbreak of these populations. So we've heard already many different effects having this severely effect of these pest species. I want to focus on 2 additional aspects. On the left side in the slide you see this bluish colored timber. So you see the gallery of the beetles, and within the gallery you see this bluish colored bluish color. Actually looks pretty nice, but it is not the case. So this is a blue stain fungi, which is associated with bark beetles. If you see a tree affected by a bark beetles, it's very often that you can observe also these bluish colors. This means the beetle focuses a symbiosis with fungi. They passively introduce the fungi spores into the galleries. The fungi are growing there and help the beetle also to survive, to have a better fitness, to give some nutrients, etc. On the other hand, a very important role, which is currently understudied, are bacteria associated with the insects. Earlier today, we heard about the importance of bacteria, microorganisms in general, in the soil, but the same is true in insects. Insects are dependent on the symbiosis with different microorganisms. These generally are huge a continuum basically from beneficial impacts, providing them nutrients, to a parasitic impact where they really can have severe effects on the reproduction of the hosts. And when Martin mentioned, the talk before me, when Martin mentioned the importance and why bark beetles are so important, by having a pheromone system, by being able to survive the defense of the host, by several different aspects. All of those aspects are always associated also with fungi and bacteria. So bacteria and fungi have an important role on the ecosystem, on the host, but they are currently understudied. And this is the goal of our study. So we currently study the composition and the genetic structure of microorganisms. So means microorganisms, fungi, but also bacteria in the host. And as I tried to depict here, the most important bacteria will be in the gut of the beetle, but also maybe in the surrounding of the beetle. So therefore, by extracting the whole DNA of a single individual of a beetle, we are not only extracting the DNA of the beetle itself, but we are also extracting the DNA of the fungi, of the spores which are sitting on the surface of the beetle, but also within the beetle, in the gut of the beetle, etc. But we are also amplifying all the bacteria which are associated on the surface of the beetle, but also here on the gut. So by sequencing all what is in the beetle, we are able to get an overview of the community structure of the fungi and the bacteria. And by using these innovative genetic methods, we are able to get an overview of these compositions. So therefore, we try to have a better understanding of mass reproduction. So fungi and bacteria as well have important aspects on the fitness of the host. And by knowing the community, we have a better understanding. And we we are also able, hopefully, to get an overview of the role of the fungi and bacteria in the population dynamics of the host. Especially, we are trying to study now the outbreaking populations in these areas to see if specific bacteria, if specific fungi are associated with the initial attack of healthy trees, and that they might help the beetles to survive the defense of the host. With this, I would like to conclude. Moussa Abdelhamed is currently studying the microorganisms, so especially focused on the bacteria. Gulia Arena is studying currently the fungi. The project is in cooperation with the colleagues at the BOCUM Vienna, the University in Padova, and here we will hear also a talk of Aurora later today about this aspect of the work. I'll thank you, thank the organizers, and I'm happy to hear some questions.